Hi guys, it's Debbie. Now last week the 4th season of Sherlock began, and although we all really appreciated the Six Thatchers, the first episode of this new season, we were heavily influenced by extremely dark and promising trailers, and remember we also had 3 long years to come up with all sorts of possible theories, explanations and possible plot twists. So when we saw last week's episode, we were all slightly disappointed because our expectations were ridiculously high, and also except for the ending, the episode was quite bright. But last night's episode, The Lying Detective, was absolutely amazing. It exceeded our expectations. It had absolutely everything that we had been expecting and even more. Now most of what I'll be saying from this moment onwards will contain spoilers, so if you haven't seen last night's episode, The Lying Detective, please check it out before watching this video, or I would recommend watching last week's video in which I spoke of Sherlock in general and I introduced the Six Thatchers, the first episode of the season, without any spoilers. Now last night's episode, The Lying Detective, completely reflects all the dark trailers we had been seeing, as the 2 main topics are death and mental health. Death is seen through the thoughts of Culverton Smith, portrayed by Toby Jones, an absolutely incredible villain, with his creepy laughter, the close-ups of his mouth and his constant need to always be at the centre of attention, whether by shocking people, for example the kids at the hospital, or his constant need to always talk, answer back, touch, hug. He always has to be present. He needs to be in control of the situation. His mind is dark and twisted, and we can see this through the way he needs his victim to beg for his own life, which is absolutely disgusting. He has power, money, fame, but yet this is not enough. As a matter of fact, he is excited when he is caught, and he is confessing his crimes because he realizes that as soon as the media will get their hands on this information, he'll become even more famous. Also, one of the creepiest features is that it all seems like a game for him. He teases Sherlock, he teases the public. So in this episode, death is seen through the eyes of somebody who craves it, who needs it, who needs to see other people in pain. He needs to see them begging for their life. Then we have a less gory but still heartbreaking analysis of death, or actually grief following death, because John Watson finds himself in a situation of loneliness, of emptiness, of not having his beloved Mary by his side, and her sudden death not only isolated him from the rest of the world, but also isolated him from Sherlock, his best friend and the only other person in the world that loves him as much as Mary did. Mary's death, the Sherlock's addiction, Culverton, and the distance between Sherlock and John connects the theme of death to the theme of mental health. Both John and Sherlock have to come to terms with the effects that trauma has on our minds. John's loneliness spirals into sleepless nights, use of alcohol, isolation from the rest of society, and he also starts to show some signs of paranoia, and he starts having visions of Mary speaking to him, where in reality it's just him speaking to himself. This is also because his feeling of guilt for cheating on Mary. Sherlock instead feels guilty because he feels responsible of Mary's death, and he also starts to contemplate death and suicide. He starts to have thoughts about what death actually means. For example, when he considers, why do we say taking our life? From who are we taking it from? As a matter of fact, Benedict Cumberbatch was absolutely amazing in this episode. We've never seen Sherlock this helpless. He's always had an answer to absolutely anything. He's never been in doubt. He's never had this fear of death. Last week I was speaking about the cracks that were starting to form in Sherlock's confident facade, but in this episode, in the moment in which he starts to realise that faith could have been part of his imagination, in that precise moment, his facade completely crumbles. He was able to predict weeks before where John would have been and at what time. He manages to defeat a serial killer under the influence of heavy drugs, but yet he is in despair when he realises that faith could have been part of his mind. And this is when one of the biggest plot twists comes in. Eurus, Sherlock and Mycroft's sister, which had been disguising herself as John's therapist, and which also probably was the woman John met on the bus and which he was texting. Eurus also somehow managed to be with Sherlock that night in which he imagined Faith. We still haven't got an answer about this. The episode ends with Eurus shooting in John's direction, but personally I have no fear about John's death. I don't think that Eurus killed him at the end of the episode. I'm more interested in Eurus. Who is she? Where has she been all this time? Is there a fourth brother? Because remember, what is it with number 3? People always give up after number 3. And hands up whoever thought that was Moriarty in disguise. I can't have been the only one thinking it. Although the main themes are mental health, death, emptiness, loneliness, abandonment, isolation, there is always one feature which is stronger than all of these, and which will be the light at the end of the tunnel, which is friendship. John and Sherlock's friendship is stronger than anything else. It's a bond that will never ever separate them. They both know that they need each other. They both are understanding of one another. Sherlock is the most arrogant person you could ever meet, but he silently, patiently waits for John to finish speaking with Mary himself, and then hugs him, admitting that the situation is not okay. He says it's not okay, it is what it is. John doesn't need someone that will simply pat him on the back. He needs somebody that's been in that dark pit. He needs somebody that understands what he's feeling, not somebody that will just say, oh, it's okay. He needs somebody to know that knows that it's not okay, but it's fine that it's not okay, because you can get better from that point, but they can only get better together. And John, on the other hand, understands that Sherlock is not guilty for Mary's death. It's that Mary sacrificed herself in order to protect Sherlock, to save him. So they can only be strong together because they're the only two people that understand each other. Now moving on to some lighter features. Irene Adler. She was saved by Sherlock at the end of a scandal in Belgravia, and if she came back, it would be absolutely awesome. The relationship between her and Sherlock was so ambiguous, intriguing and interesting, and also could the I love you that we saw in the trailer be referred to her? Who knows, we'll just have to keep on watching. That ringtone couldn't have just been casual. The episode was also visually impressive, with Sherlock's mind influenced by the use of heavy drugs, visually represented through a fast sequence of different scenes which skipped from Culverton's TV appearances to Sherlock's normal life to the deductions to his altered state of mind. So we skip quickly between these different scenes, and this creates a state of disorientation. This type of representation is also used towards the end of Requiem for a Dream, and it is also used in Trainspotting in the scene in which Renton is recovering from the use of heavy drugs, especially with this feature of the TV shows, as if they were also a drug. So this type of rapid flashing perfectly describes Sherlock's mind in those moments. In general, the Lying Detective, though, didn't remove any of Sherlock's usual humour. As a matter of fact, we see Mrs. Hudson as we would never ever imagine seeing her. Sherlock still somehow manages to come up with his funny, arrogant sentences, and then we have a lot of familiar situations. So for example, Molly not understanding what's going on but still not questioning anything, Mycroft using Secret Service equipment to monitor his brother, and so on. So well done, Sherlock. This was one of the best episodes that have ever aired. The line detecting is everything we were expecting and much more. The next episode will air next week and will be called The Final Problem. Unfortunately, it will be the third and final episode of the 4th season, and I can't even begin to imagine how much we are going to have to wait for the 5th season. But for now, let's just hope that the next episode will answer some of the questions we have after last night's episode. I hope you enjoyed this video, and look out for next week's video about the last episode of the 4th season. See you soon, bye!